The title of this talk is Perceptual Prominence of Accent Types and the Role of Expectations. I am Christine Röhr from the Phonetics Department of the University of Cologne, and my co-authors are Stefan Baumann, Petra Schumacher, and Martine Grice. This presentation is concerned with the following questions. How do accent types contribute to the perceived prominence of words? What is the role of contextually induced expectations on the perception of prominence and on the appropriateness of specific accents? I will present 3 different perception experiments that we applied to the same set of stimuli. We conducted prominence ratings of different German intonation contours with and without context, and we additionally conducted appropriateness ratings for the sentences with context. It is well known that prosodic prominence plays an important role in the linguistic marking of information structure. For instance, for West Germanic languages, there is ample evidence that information status and focus domains of different sizes and types are marked by the level of prominence expressed by different pitch accent types. That is, new or less accessible information and words in narrow and contrastive focus have been found to involve greater prosodic prominence that is higher and rising accents. Whereas given or background information and words in non-contrastive and broad focus domains involve less prosodic prominence, that is lower and falling accents. Moreover, listeners have been found to be able to correctly interpret intended information structural categories on the basis of discrete and continuous modifications of pitch, or in other words, on the basis of prosodic prominence. With regard to the perception of prosodic prominence, in a previous study on German, we attested a direct relation between the perceptual prominence and different accent types which are displayed in the small pictures. We found that varying degrees of prominence can be attributed to 3 tonal dimensions in the acoustic signal. Most important for German listeners is the direction of the accentual tonal movement, with rising accents being more prominent than falling accents. The degree of pitch excursion, that is a steep or a shallow tonal movement, and the height of the tonal target are relevant as well, but perceptually less decisive. However, there is also evidence that the perception of prominence is not only determined by the acoustic signal, but may also be affected by intrinsic properties of words, as well as language-specific expectations and interpretations of pragmatic and phonological context. For instance, low frequency and less predictable words have been found to be more likely to be perceived as prominent. A similar effect has been also found for less probable F0 contours. Importantly, these effects turned out to be mostly independent of the acoustic prominence. Moreover, Bishop showed that contextually induced expectations may even override the prominence information provided by the acoustic signal. By means of 3 perception experiments, we aim to provide further evidence for the perceptual prominence of German accent types and to further investigate the effect of contextually induced expectations that are not related to information structural aspects. In 2 perception experiments, we assessed untrained listeners' intuitions about the degree of the prominence of words in isolated and in contextualized sentences, so as to investigate both the acoustic and contextual influence on prominence perception. In a 3rd study, we additionally evaluated the appropriateness of the test sentences with respect to expectations as to how exciting the content of a following utterance will be. In order to replicate previous findings on the perceptual prominence of accent types on more naturally produced data, we constructed 60 test sentences along the lines of A to D. The direct object of the test sentences, which is Milena in this example, serves as the test word. We tested each of the 60 sentences in isolation with 4 different prosodic realizations on the test word. The intended intonation contours are indicated by the stylized lines. We tested a steep rising L plus H star accent, indicated in red,
Wir haben Milena getroffen. Wir haben Milena getroffen.
A shallow rising H-star accent indicated in green.
Wir haben Milena getroffen. Wir haben Milena getroffen.
A falling H plus L-star accent indicated in blue.
Wir haben Milena getroffen. Wir haben Milena getroffen.
And de-accentuation of the test item with a nuclear accent on the sentence final participle.
Wir haben Milena getroffen. Wir haben Milena getroffen.
All stimuli were read by a trained male phonetician in a very stable manner in each of the 4 conditions. The figure to the right shows the mean F0 contours. If no context is provided and only the acoustic signal plays a role, we expect an increase in perceptual prominence of the target items from de-accentuation of the target through falling and shallow rising to steep rising nuclear pitch accents. All perception studies were conducted through web-based questionnaires implemented with the SOSI survey software. 22 subjects rated the prominence of the isolated sentences. Their task was to evaluate the degree of each word of a test sentence standing out in relation to neighboring words. Judgments were given on a visual analog scale, with the left pole labeled "not at all highlighted" and the right pole labeled "strongly highlighted." This figure displays the mean prominence ratings for each word on the vertical axis. Higher values reflect a higher degree of perceptual prominence. Results reveal that L plus H star accents were clearly perceived as most prominent. L plus H star accents on the noun, indicated by the red solid line, and L plus H star accents on the participle, indicated by the gray dashed line, even received similar prominence scores. H star accents, indicated by the green dashed line, and falling H plus L star accents on the noun, indicated by the blue dotted line, received significantly lower medial prominence values. As to the unaccented words, the pronoun wir and the auxiliary haben were rated as least prominent. However, de-accented nouns, indicated by the gray dashed line, as well as unaccented participles, indicated by the colored lines, reveal somewhat higher prominence scores, which might be related to a higher probability for being accented in the tested sentence structure. Overall, our hypotheses and previous results on the perceptual prominence of accent types are mostly confirmed. The perceptual prominence of the target items increases from de-accentuation of the target through H star and H plus L star accents to L plus H star accents. In the second set of our experiments, the sentences with a steep rising L plus H star accent and those with a falling H plus L star accent on the target word were crossed with 2 types of precontexts that generate different expectations about appropriate prosody in the test sentences. The context on the left side, labeled exciting context, builds up an expectation for new exciting information, guiding the attention of the listener to an event that is expected to be highlighted by prosodic prominence. By contrast, the context on the right side, labeled neutral context, establishes that nothing new or unusual will follow, and thus builds up an expectation for a more neutral and unmarked prosodic realization. Test sentences with a prominent L plus H star accent, typically found on new information, should match the exciting, but not the neutral context. Let's listen to the matching condition.
Rate mal, was uns heute passiert ist. Wir haben Milena getroffen.
And the mismatching condition?
Heute ist nichts Besonderes passiert. Wir haben Milena getroffen.
Conversely, test sentences with a less prominent H plus L star accent, typically found on contextually derivable information, should match the neutral context and may be permissible after the exciting context. Let's listen to the matching condition first.
Heute ist nichts Besonderes passiert. Wir haben Milena getroffen.
And now the mismatching condition.
Rate mal, was uns heute passiert ist. Wir haben Milena getroffen.
Furthermore, we expect that the context influences speech perception, assuming that context expressing excitement leads to an increase in perceptual prominence for both rising and falling accents. 23 subjects rated the prominence of each word in the contextualized sentences. Both the context sentence and the target sentence were presented acoustically and orthographically. This figure displays the mean prominence ratings for sentences with a rising L+H star nuclear accent on the target on the left side, and for the sentences with a falling H+L star nuclear accent on the right side. The 6 solid lines represent the ratings for sentences presented after the exciting context. The thin dashed lines represent ratings for sentences presented after the neutral context. First of all, the results reveal that the prominence ratings for steep rising and falling accents are replicated when presented in context. Rising L+H star accents are perceived as more prominent than falling H+L star accents. Their prominence scores are similar to the scores that the same sentences received in the first experiment without context. However, the context type had no effect on the perception of prominence. Hence, listeners' prominence ratings appear to rely primarily on acoustic cues. In a follow-up study, we additionally tested the listeners' intuitions about the congruence of our sentence combinations. 23 subjects rated the appropriateness of the test sentences. More precisely, their task was to evaluate how well the melody of a target sentence matched the preceding context. Judgments were given on a visual analog scale, with the left pole labeled "does not match at all" and the right pole labeled "matches very well." While both the context and the target sentence were presented acoustically, only the context sentence was presented orthographically. In this figure, the mean appropriateness ratings are displayed on the vertical axis. Higher ratings reflect a higher degree of appropriateness. The red solid line on the left side shows the results for sentences with a prominent rising L+H star nuclear accent on the target. L+H star accents were clearly perceived as appropriate in the exciting context, but not in the neutral one. The blue dotted line on the right side shows the results for sentences with a less prominent falling H+L star nuclear accent on the target. H+L star accents obtained the highest appropriateness scores in the neutral context, but were also perceived as appropriate in the exciting context. This suggests that falling accents, similar to shallow rising H star accents and due to their lower perceptual prominence, may serve as a prosodic default realization, which is in line with the observation that H+L star accents commonly occur in reading style, especially in isolated all-new broad focus sentences or paragraph finally. To conclude, the perception studies suggest that in German a pronounced rising pitch as an L+H star accents is a decisive cue to enhance perceptual prominence, while a falling pitch as an H+L star accents is less conspicuous and cues a medium level of prominence. Contrary to previous findings for English, listeners in our study did not take contextual information into account when rating perceptual prominence. However, the different levels of perceptual prominence appear to license the use of a particular accent type in different contexts. While prominent accents were only appropriate as a marker of exciting information, less prominent accents were equally appropriate as a marker of neutral and exciting information, indicating that they did not need to be contextually licensed and may serve as a prosodic default realization. Hence, our results provide further evidence that the pitch movement leading towards the target on the accented syllable is an important cue to the perception of prominence. We also showed that not all pitch accents are equally appropriate or inappropriate in context. Thank you for your attention.